Buonasera a tutti, good evening and welcome to the Italian Radio Hour. Io sono Viviana and I would like to welcome back our regular listeners and also welcome any new listeners. Also, be sure to like us on Instagram and Facebook at Italian Radio Hour and subscribe to our YouTube channel to catch up on any past video interviews. Vorrei dare il benvenuto ai nostri ascoltatori da tutto il mondo, grazie per essere con noi anche oggi mentre continuiamo il nostro viaggio per l'Italia e la cultura italiana. Today we are joined by award-winning filmmaker Peter Miller, whose work has consistently brought stories of cultural icons, history, and the human spirit to the screen. His documentaries, from Frank Lloyd Wright to the most recent Marcella, Peter often spotlights subjects whose lives resonates far beyond their own fields. In Marcella, a documentary celebrating the life and legacy of Marcella Hazan, the Italian cook and teacher who revolutionized the way Americans understood and cooked Italian food, Peter captures not only Marcella's extraordinary career, but also the warmth, determination, and passion that made her a beloved figure around the world. So please go and get one of the Marcella Hazan's cookbook, sit back and relax, and we'll be right back. Parli italiano? Do you want to learn, improve, or master your Italian? Istituto Mondo Italiano can help. Located in the heart of Regent Square, Mondo Italiano offers small group classes and one-on-one private tutoring in person or online to help you learn Italian in no time. Visit us online at istitutomondoitaliano.org. Peter, hello, how are you? It's such an honor to have you.
It's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me along.
So I'm so excited to have this conversation on this beautiful documentary that I had the pleasure to recently watch. But before, we're going to keep our audience a little bit on their toes still, because I would like to for you to tell us a little more about yourself and share a little bit about your journey into filmmaking. If there was a particular moment or influence or a figure that led you on to this path?
Oh, that's a big question. But my journey is the only job I've ever had is being a documentary filmmaker. I got out of college in the 1980s and I thought I would be an activist. I didn't know that that wasn't really a job, but I wanted to change the world for the better. And I somehow managed to get hired by a wonderful Academy Award-winning filmmaker who needed an assistant to help make a film about labor unions. And I worked with her for years and years. The film we made won an Oscar for Best Documentary. I ended up then getting hired by Ken Burns to work on his epic American history PBS series. And somewhere along the way, realized that I had stories myself to tell. And so I wanted to be able to tell stories of fascinating, complicated, heroic people and of important history and culture. And I've been lucky enough to be able to do that for the past 30 something years, most recently making a film about my cooking hero, Marcella Hazan.
So you said cooking here. So I guess there is a kitchen is involved, right? It's because it's kind of quite unexpected. Obviously, she was such an influencer, an influencing figure for us. But I was wondering, well, how familiar were you with Marcella and her cooking?
I've been making documentaries for 30 something years. I've been making dinner just as long. My wife and I both work hard all day long and have forever. And at the end of the day, we climb out of our desks and go into the kitchen and we look in, what ingredients we have. And most nights we cook from Marcella Hazan. We cook Italian food. We're not Italian, but we love Italian food. And our go-to guru for how to prepare food in an authentic and delicious way is Marcella. I've been reading her cookbooks forever. I'll go to the farmer's market in my neighborhood in New York City and I'll get some vegetables or some meat or some fish and come home and say, what would Marcella do? And
Mm.
she is this voice, this smoky, accented voice in the back of our heads coaching us, guiding us, cajoling us, and telling us how to prepare food in the most wonderful way.
But from being inspired in the kitchen from her books to actually make a documentary about her, what led to that? Let's do it. Let's create a documentary on Marcella.
Well, it all started with ravioli. Uh,
It sounds like it's going to be a great story.
So one day I went to the farmer's market in my neighborhood and I got some stinging nettles. I don't know if you've ever I've walked through fields of stinging nettles and they hurt when you touch them, but I knew that people eat them, and they were for sale. And I thought, well, what do I do with these? So I brought them home and we looked in Marcella. She's like, you could put them in your ravioli. Okay,
Hmm.
okay, that's great. So one day, this is maybe 6 years ago, my wife and I are preparing ravioli. We're rolling out the dough and we're making the stuffing and we're shaping them and doing all the things we do and about 2 hours into this very long process, we looked at each other and said, has anyone ever made a documentary about Marcella? And the answer we quickly Google told us was no, no one had ever told her story. And she's exactly the kind of character that I love to tell stories of, creative, heroic, complicated, fascinating, a huge personality. And so the next morning, the ravioli were delicious. But the next morning, we, um, I phoned up her son, Giuliano Hazan. Giuliano is a cooking teacher and cookbook writer, and he lives in Florida. And I knew that he was around teaching. And I said, "What do you think about a documentary about your mom?" And he said, "Yes, that would be great, but you got to talk to my dad." I thought, "Your dad?" So Marcella was married for 60 something years to Victor Hazan. Victor was her partner in life and in cookbook writing. He was this incredibly eloquent writer who helped her shape her recipes into beautiful prose. I had no idea he was still alive. He was in his early 90s. So
Hmm.
I called him up and said, "What do you think about a film about Marcella?" He said, "Absolutely, yes. Oh, and by the way, I live in Florida, but I'm going to be in New York in 2 weeks. You should interview me." I said, "Heck yeah." So he came to my house. I filmed him for maybe 3.5 hours. He was the most articulate, fabulous, charming, great storyteller. And we were off and running. I knew I had to make this film. And it wasn't just going to be a film about cooking, it was going to be a film about an amazing, wonderful human being and her extraordinary life.
Mhm. And you can also see, the partnership that they had. Also, Victor's family, if you don't mind sharing, didn't have an easy background, and the how, if you can elaborate on how from Italy they end up in the U.S. There was a lot of back and forth between Italy and U.S. not only in Victor's life, but then as a married couple. So, if you can tell us a little bit about the background of Victor's family.
Victor Hazan grew up in Italy in a Sephardic Jewish family, and they had a business in the city of Cesena, and they were uh, living their lives until the late 1930s when it became increasingly difficult to be Jewish and living in Italy, and Mussolini had aligned with Hitler, and his family saw the writing on the wall and they got out, and they came to New York City. So from the time he was maybe 10 years old, Victor, this Italian-born kid, was living in New York. He's extremely bright. He ends up going to Harvard. He's, a great writer and scholar, and he's a smart guy. He ends up running the family business with them. Um, but all the while, he just wants to go back to Italy and see where he came from. And World War II ends, and it's the 1950s, and he says, "I'm going to go back home and be reminded of where I came from, especially the food where I came from, because he had this real attachment to Italian cuisine." He goes back. It's summertime. He goes to Cesenatico, which is a seaside town right near where he grew up, and he sees a gorgeous young woman. She knows people in common with him. They get introduced. They fall in love. They go out for a while, and eventually he proposes and they get married.
Mhm.
And that's 1955. So he's an American Italian person visiting this magnificent young woman in Italy. Now, Marcella, at this point, had earned 2 doctorates in the natural sciences. She's a scientist. She'd never cooked anything. She said, "I never boiled water unless it was in the beaker in the laboratory. And she gets swept off her feet by this wonderful young man. And he says, "You got to move back with me to New York. I'm going to work at my family business." She doesn't speak any English. And they go to New York City. She very bravely resettles in a place she'd never thought about or been to. And she is no longer working as a scientist. She's a housewife. And Victor expects her to put a meal on the table every day the way that Italians do. She'd never cooked. So
Yeah.
she's 1955, New York City, living in a little apartment in Queens, and she's trying to figure out how to put a meal on the table for her husband, who she's madly in love with. And she reverse engineers how to make Italian food that she remembers from her childhood in New York City, where the ingredients are terrible. I mean, this was, remember, 1950s. This is when your Parmesan cheese came in a shaker container made by Kraft. I mean, you couldn't get good pasta. You couldn't get good olive oil. There was no extra virgin olive oil in America at the time. Marcella figures it out. She travels all over the place and she learns how to cook. And this was a big part of their ritual, was that she would make him meals every day, and he was a huge enthusiast and he loved this, and this was the basis of their happy relationship. Um, and at some point, she got to be so good at this that she started giving cooking lessons,
Mhm.
and she started teaching other American women how to cook. And she was very popular. She did really well. It got written up in the New York Times, this class.
That's
And
great. Mhm.
and the New York Times said, here's a great authentic Italian cooking class. People started signing up for it. It was, it became a thing. And they'd moved to Manhattan at this point, and she would teach these women how to cook authentic Italian food. And then, of course, the New York Times comes back and they write a big article about this meal that she served to their food editor, Craig Claiborne, who was just blown away and had wrote a half a page spread on how magnificent this lunch from this Italian cooking teacher was. At which point, a cookbook publisher gets wind of this and says, "Oh, this person could write an Italian cookbook." And this is a time when Americans are thinking about Italy and thinking about Italian food and are traveling more. It's the 1970s, and our minds are open to authentic, local, in-season cuisine. And she publishes a cookbook called the Classic Italian Cookbook. And it is, I think a lot of people feel like it's the definitive cookbook that introduces America to how to make Italian food in all of its wonderful diversity and wonder.
Okay, so I'm going to interrupt you for a second because I would like to show the trailer of your documentary because there are so many questions that I want to ask you about, and also in your approach in eventually making this documentary, because it could have been just about cooking, or it could have been just about her story and personality. And you magically, again, like one of Zan's sauces, you blend a little bit of this, a little bit of that. So I want to know a little bit also of your research. So let's go ahead and share the trailer and enjoy a couple of minutes of your work. Okay.
Italian cooking is very simple, but it's not easy.
Marcella Hazan was the person who helped you transmit love to somebody through the kitchen.
Julia Child has called her my mentor in all things Italian.
She is to Italian cooking what Muhammad Ali is to boxing, the champ.
Marcella Hazan.
Marcella Hazan. Marcella Hazan.
Most people in America had never really experienced Italian food like people eat in Italy.
When I grew up, we didn't have extra virgin olive oil. We didn't have arugula. We didn't have radicchio.
We didn't even know what risotto was.
She unlocked one of the greatest joys in the world, which are the culinary pleasures of Italy.
It was a revelation.
The woman
was an intelligent, trained scientist.
I never cooked in my life until I married. I never boiled water if it was not in the beaker in the laboratory.
Marcella realized that there had always been a cook inside her. She decides to begin teaching Italian cooking to American women. Marcella gets a call.
I said, would you like to do a cookbook? A cookbook?
I decided it was impossible because I don't write in English. And Victor said, well, if you want, I will translate.
And in less than a year, we had produced a book that made history.
She was an absolute perfectionist. There was only one way of doing things.
She has no qualms about saying if you're doing something wrong.
And if she didn't feel something was right, she voiced it.
People in power, especially in the food world, find very threatening a woman who has the guts to stand up for herself.
I'm in awe of you. I always have been.
Thank you.
To you, Marcella, and for all the good that you did to America's food. Thank you.
Okay, so we have a lot of elements to continue our conversation. So we left, and when and we saw her, when I asked her to write the cookbook, and she said, "I don't, I don't write." So this is where she and her husband, again, it's a theme that we see how strong their partnership was, and you were very good also at making us understanding that he, although he was an equal genius, he's kind of allowed Marcella to take the limelight, to be on stage with her craft. But it was indeed, to me, a marriage of the minds, and maybe also her success of, engineering or re-engineering the cooking might have come also from her strong scientific background. So let's talk a little bit about your approach to making the documentary, because now you have talked to the husband. The son is also an author, a chef, but there are other people, other chefs, other critics in the food world that we are familiar with. How did you track them down, or how were you pointed in their direction to complement the story?
Well, the family, were very enthusiastic about getting Marcella's story told. And it's interesting that, as important as she was really, the equivalent of Julia Child in many ways. She really changed the way Americans approached Italian food, but all cooking. But no one had ever written her biography. She had written a beautiful memoir called Amarcord, which means I remember in the dialect of her native Emilia-Romagna. But nobody had ever written sort of the scholarly or the biographical story of her life. So I had to do a lot of original research, to figure out, where she went and what she did and what her journey was. And one of the things that I discovered was that in addition to being a story of, genius and cooking and a marriage and whatever, it's also a story of disability. Marcella had injured her right hand as a child, and it never healed properly. And so for her entire life, she had a badly disfigured right hand that she could barely use. And she was right-handed. So she couldn't write with her right hand. She couldn't use a knife and cook in the kitchen with her right hand. I mean, it was really a challenge for her. And in some ways, this injury, a number of people I talked to for the film said, really shaped who she was and gave her that kind of willfulness and determination that somebody who had to overcome that kind of disability would have. I mean, so at the heart of any movie is a story of a human being, is a story of a character and how that character grows and develops and changes. And boy, what a story hers was. So I started looking for people who could help tell that story. And of course, there were a lot of people who loved her and knew her and cooked with her and studied with her and were her friends. So I spoke with her, Victor, several times. He still alive today. He's 96 and a half, and he's still every bit as brilliant as he ever was, though his body is having some challenges. His son, Giuliano, uh, is throughout the film telling the story, but so are people who came to her classes or people who became friends with her through various things. I mean, Jacques Pepin, the great French cooking teacher and TV personality, Lydia Bastianich shows up in the film. So does April Bloomfield, who's a wonderful chef who's run some of the best restaurants in New York. For whom Marcella was a touchstone. And here's a person cooking incredibly sophisticated, restaurant food, but for whom this person who's teaching us about really simple home cooking is her go-to source of inspiration. And what I found was that people really connected with her, not just about how she taught them to cook, but emotionally. She was this source of inspiration and guidance in people's lives. And she was tough as nails. I mean, one of the things about Marcella is that she didn't suffer fools. She told you what was on her mind. She smoked cigarettes. She drank Jack Daniels. She would tell you what she was thinking, even if the truth wasn't very kind. And though she was a loving and lovely person who people who knew really loved, she was also scary and intimidating and was, formidable. She didn't really have filters on what she told you. One person in the film says she minced garlic, but she didn't mince words.
Yes, absolutely. And yes, talking about the experiences, as you have on the documentary, there's some people replicating her recipes that we have the red sauce, we have the lemon chicken that seems to be extremely easy and approachable to anyone. But if you follow, the order, certain things are meant to be done. So that's where I see also her scientific approach. They are kind of anyone can make them as long as again they follow the process. And she has such a presence in the kitchen, outside the kitchen, that I think it's April that gets pretty emotional when she's replicating the dish because she's feeling a little bit like yourself while you're cooking. You feel in the presence of Marcella telling you, "Oh, no, 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 take that onion out. It's done its job."
Yeah, no, Marty, she is this voice, and it's a great voice, and it's a distinctive voice. And also, because this is her story, I felt it was really important to have her be the lead character in telling the story, but she had died in 2013, and I started the film in 2018, so I missed her by 5 years. So how do I put her voice and her point of view into the film? And it occurred to me and to my filmmaking partner, Amy Linton, who is my editor and who I've been making films with forever. We were like, we've got to get Marcella to be front and center in telling her own story. So we found passages from her autobiography and from her writing and had an actor reading from these. And we found the handful of times when somebody thought to ask her about her life on video back in the day and ask her about because most of the time when Marcella was on TV, she's showing us how to make the lemon chicken or she's showing us how to make, a recipe. But rarely did anyone say, "Where do you come from? What was your life like? What did you see? What did you do?" One time she was interviewed for, maybe a half an hour about her life, and we weave that into the story so that Marcella herself gets to tell her own story and her personality gets to shine through.
Yes, indeed. That's where we can see. I mean, and there also you have some shots where she's kind of relaxed, maybe family moments. So it's not just this personality that sometimes even matter of luck when someone writes about you, the right paper writes about you. So a sequence of events that brought her to become. Now, obviously, what is really important is that, Marcella might probably be more known here in the US than in Italy, because Italy kind of didn't need a Marcella at that point. But the US definitely needed a Marcella to kind of set the stage of what Italian cuisine was, and how you can be ingenious, to make certain things happen when you don't have access to the same ingredients. But when you had this shot of the fish market in Venice, without even looking at the context, I've been there. I've been in the middle of the action. So it's nice. Tell us a little bit about the places that you had that you decided to shoot at, whether there were any challenges. You mentioned 2018. I'm sure also COVID had some impact on your production. If you want to tell us a little bit about your journey to make this documentary happen.
Yeah, well, I started making the film in 2018, and then I filmed a bunch in 2019, and then 2020 happens, and it no longer is possible to go to people's homes and film them. For about 2 years, I couldn't go and film, but it gave me a chance to really dive in and do my research. It also, because of the financial challenges of trying to make a film during a global pandemic, it took a long time to raise the money to make the film. All of that meant that I just have to keep meeting people and talking to people and listening to stories and finding photographs and finding film clips and doing all the work of uncovering the story. It took about 6 years from beginning to end to tell this story. But I think the film, if you think about Marcella's amazing, delicious bolognese ragu,
Mm-hmm.
it takes most of a day to cook this, but it's amazing. It's fantastic. And if you hurry it, it's not going to be as good. And I feel like in some ways that's the nature of filmmaking also. If you take the time to let it simmer and let the flavors grow, you'll end up with a more delicious sauce. And I hope that that's the case for this movie. But it did occur to me that one of the stories in the film that's most important is the story of how we relate to her food in our kitchens. And this couldn't be just a straight biography where we talk only about Marcella's life. We also had to see how it is you make this food. And so I got a number of people who I was going to interview anyway to be interviewed while they're cooking. And that was different for me. I've made films about all kinds of topics. Sacco Vanzetti was my film, or I made a film about a songwriter named Doc Pomus. I've made films about all kinds of interesting people. But this is my first film about a cook. And we really had to bring our cameras into people's kitchens and watch them cook and have them talk about her cooking while they're cooking. And the magic was not just that we get to watch a great chef make the tomato sauce or make the lemon chicken or make the bolognese or make her risotto, but that you see how people get emotionally involved as they're cooking. So her son, Giuliano's cooking risotto, remembering his mother teaching him to cook, and it's a heavy emotional moment. April Bloomfield's cooking Marcella's famous 3-ingredient tomato sauce, and she's crying. This is surprising and wonderful, but it also speaks to what effect this woman had on people's minds and lives and hearts.
So I'm going to, because you mentioned also some additional documentary work that you have done, we are going to transition into a couple of questions on your previous work. But I do have one that if Marcella were cooking for you tonight, what dish would you hope she would make for you?
I would love it if Marcella would cook for me tonight. I don't think anything would make me happier in the world. The thing about Marcella, I'm going to dodge your question, is that one of the things she taught us was to cook what's in season, what's fresh, what's in the farmer's market, or what the fisher people are pulling out of the ocean that day. I mean, when you go to the Rialto market in Venice, which I was lucky enough to do for this film, and you're filming the fish vendors and the vegetable vendors, and you're seeing the people going there and looking at this food. I mean, one of the great themes is the idea that the food comes from nearby. It's nostrano. It's our local production. And so if Marcella were coming to my house and cooking for me, I would hope that she would drop by the local farmer's market and see what was in season, pick the best thing, and then cook something where the ingredients inspire the cooking, rather than trying to make great tomatoes in February where there aren't any. So I'm on, I'm on an island right now on vacation, and my wife just went to the local farmer's market and got some vegetables and some seafood, and we're going to figure out what to do with that, probably consulting Marcella's classic cookbooks and figuring out, what do you do with this amazing ingredient? And I think that's the spirit of Marcella. And I think that Americans and people all over the world have embraced that idea that eating local, eating what is handmade and wonderful is a transformative and positive act. And it's something that we can aspire to if we're lucky enough to be where there are great ingredients.
Wonderful. Yes, that's a very strong message because right now expectations that certain fruits and vegetables are always available at our supermarket is not doing nature a favor. It's not indeed. So the other tougher question, if Marcella herself could sit down and watch your film, what would you hope her reaction would be?
That's such a question. I mean, I got to meet Marcella once for about 10 minutes back in the 1990s.
Yes. Tell us about that encounter.
and I was we were just big fans, and we loved her, and she's like his presence, but we never met her. We met her and said, "It's such an honor to meet you, and thank you, for everything that you've contributed. Oh, and by the way, there's a recipe that we've been making a bunch of yours lately." And when we get to the very end of it, I think it was a veal with sage and white wine, where you finish at the end with some butter and you emulsify the butter in, and it's a delicious dish. But every once in a while, our sauce would fall apart at the end, and the butter wouldn't emulsify. So my wife said, "Marcella, every once in a while, I make this dish and the sauce breaks." And Marcella looked at her over her glass of bourbon and her cigarette and said, "The sauce does not break."
Uh-oh.
And the message was, "There's nothing the matter with my recipe. The problem, honey, is you." And she was right, of course.
Now you got
But
offended by Marcella. Great.
but then we were like, "Oh, Marcella's insulted us. We can die happy now." So if Marcella were to watch my movie, I hope she would love it. I hope she would recognize that this is a story of a heroic and wonderful person. But Marcella always told you what she was thinking. And I have no idea what she would say, but the watch, I have to say that after 6 years of immersing myself in this person's life and work and all the people around her and all the messages she had to offer, the day I got to go to Florida and sit with Victor Hazan, 96 years old, and show him the story of his life and Marcella's life was maybe the most rewarding day of film in my filmmaking career ever, because I got to watch this person see his life presented cinematically on a movie screen. And he was, this very confident, very forceful man was emotionally caught up in this. It's quite an experience seeing your life presented as a movie. But what a movie his life and her life were. I mean, you can't make this stuff up, and it is cinematic and dramatic and romantic and full of conflict and love and deliciousness. I mean, it's a heck of a story.
Indeed, and their legacy will continue on also thanks to your work. We're going to go into a quick commercial break, and then we're going to switch topic a little bit, and we'll be talking a little more about architecture.
Do you love Italian food? Want to learn the secrets of homemade pasta, sauces, and traditional recipes, just like Nana used to make? At Mondo Italiano, our authentic Italian cooking classes bring the taste of Italy right to Pittsburgh. From fresh pasta to regional specialties, every class is a delicious journey through Italy's culinary traditions. Spots fill quickly, so reserve your seat today. Call us at 412-478-2681 or find us online. Mondo Italiano, where Italy comes alive one dish at a time.
So we're back with Peter Miller, award-winning documentaries. Another amazing documentary captures the life of Frank Lloyd Wright, and that also premiered, I think, on PBS in 1998, roughly.
Mm-hmm.
So here we have another genius here in the world of the architecture, but also with a dramatic and, his personal life. You had groundbreaking work and turbulent relationships that kind of shaped him. And so again, if you would like to elaborate a little more about on this project, what drew you to produce a documentary about him, and if there was a moment during the production where you felt that you had captured the essence of Wright's life.
Well, I was lucky enough to work with Ken Burns and Lynn Novick, who are two of the great documentary history storytellers in America, and their works, from Ken's Civil War series to jazz and baseball and all of these epic series about the history of America. Right now, they've got a new film about the American Revolution. It's going to be on PBS this fall. So I had the dream job, and I got to be a producer with Ken on a film about Frank Lloyd Wright, the great architect. And the thing about Wright is, yes, his architecture was beautiful and inspiring and wonderful, and being in those buildings was just incredibly special. But at the heart of our story was a story of an extraordinary human being and a person who was not easy. I mean, Frank Lloyd Wright said something along the lines of, early in life, I had to choose between honest arrogance and hypocritical humility. And I chose honest arrogance. He was so sure of himself, and he was such a jerk in so many ways to people, that he was impossible and difficult to be with. I mean, in contrast to Marcella, who is actually a loving and warm and wonderful soul, she might have told you what was on her mind, but at her heart, she was really a sweetheart. Wright was tough, and he was not an easy character. But from his arrogance and from his self-assurance and from his belief that what he was doing was so important, he took risks and did things in architecture that nobody else would have done. So if you think about, you're in Western Pennsylvania, there's Falling Water, the great house that he was commissioned to make by a waterfall, because this family wanted to have a country house by this waterfall they loved. And so Wright, being the arrogant guy that he is like, I'm going to make this the way I want to make it. I'm not going to make it by the waterfall. I'm going to make it on the waterfall. And he creates a building that that is right on top of the stream, and says, in order for this to work, I have to create a balcony that goes way longer than technology allows us to do. They hadn't really figured out reinforced concrete then, but he's like, I want this balcony to stretch out over the waterfall. And so they create this amazing, transcendent, gorgeous house that can't actually be built and can't actually stand up under its own power. And so for the past 100 years or whatever it has been since this building has been there, they're constantly having to patch up the concrete and reinforce it and whatever. But they created a lasting, life-changing work of art. And Wright did this because of whatever is inside him that said you can do things that are impossible. He did what was impossible, for better or for worse. And I think it's really for better. I think that what we ended up with is beauty beyond what anyone else had been able to create, because he didn't know any limits.
Yes,
fascinating person.
And we are fortunate to be less than an hour away from it. So it is one of the most recommended places to visit to anyone coming to Pittsburgh. Did you have any challenges getting access to archival footage or photographs or interviews for such a sprawling life story?
One of the things we depend on as documentary makers is the community of people who keep and gather and archive and keep track of everything. And the Frank Lloyd Wright Foundation, the people who have been keeping track of his stuff, did a magnificent job of holding on to his archives. So when it was time for us to tell that story, there was all kinds of resources available. But that doesn't mean that we didn't dig everywhere else. We spent years, as we always do, finding thousands of photos and film clips and drawings and letters and correspondence. I mean, that's part of the fun of doing these stories, is being a detective and diving in and just saying, I'm not going to stop until I find every darn photo that could help me tell this story. And it's not just that you find the photos, but you find the life in the photos. So if I could be looking at a picture of Marcella Hazan, as a child, I see things in that because I know something about her as a person. So here's a picture of her as a young woman. She's pretty and she's wearing a dress and her hand is behind her back. So what's that mean? It means that she's hiding her injury because she didn't want people to see that. Well, that tells me something about her and what she went through. And it's just a snapshot. It's just a photo from her childhood, but it's a photo from her childhood with a lot of meaning in it. And whether it's Frank Lloyd Wright or whether it's Sacco Vanzetti or whether it's Marcella Hazan or whoever it is that I'm making a movie about, we are looking for the messages inside that history that tell us something deeper about the person.
Mhm. And so obviously, I would assume there is some sort of storyline that you go into the project with, but could it be that also the editing stage might actually create the story, as now you have all these pieces and you're sewing them together in a order that you thought initially was going to be this way, and then as you have more pieces, that order changes up and the story comes alive.
That's a beautiful point. I mean, documentary filmmaking and cooking are very similar activities, right? You depend on great ingredients, but you also depend on great ways to combine those ingredients. And my film editor, Amy, and I, take all of this material, we string it together, we find a story, and then we try to figure out, where's the poetry in this? Where's the emotion in this? Where's the dramatic moments that we really need to to zone in on and look at? And you caress it and you cook it and you stir it and you boil it down until it's the thickest, most delicious, perfect ragu. And that's what making movies is about. The editing, documentaries take place in the editing room. I mean, we think about the filmmaking process as running around with cameras, but it's running around with cameras for a while, and then it's going into a dark room for a really long time and figuring out how to make a story from all these materials. And to me, it's it's like cooking. It's you've got, it might just be a zucchini, but what you can do with that zucchini could be really fabulous in the right hands. And thank goodness for great documentary film editors.
Wonderful. So it's really fascinating how your work has connected visionaries across such different fields, again, from Frank Lloyd Wright shaping the spaces we live in, to Marcella Hazan, that reshaping the way we gather around the table. And in both stories, you have shown us how creativity and passion can change the rhythms of everyday life. And in Marcella's case, that legacy continues to simmer in our kitchens today. Tell us a little bit about what's next for Marcella, if you have upcoming film screenings. Anyone can enjoy the documentary through the streaming platforms, but tell us if you have some in-person engagements coming up.
Yeah, Marcella is streaming on Apple and Amazon. It's streaming on PBS. Thank goodness for PBS, our public broadcasting system, which is where we get so many wonderful stories told. And it's had a really hard year, but it's still there. And you can go on PBS Passport if you're a PBS member. You can watch Marcella at home. But really, I love watching it in a big room full of people. I mean, that's to me the joy. And so, check out our website, marcellafilm.com, and it lists everywhere the film is showing. And we had a long, wonderful run in movie theaters and film festivals, and it's still going this fall and winter. We're going to be showing all over the place and hopefully overseas as well. But check it out and go see it in a room full of people, because the experience of sharing a meal around a table or the experience of sharing a movie in a movie theater just makes that experience that much more delicious. And this is a collective story to be enjoyed collectively if you can. That's my hope. And really very little gives me more happiness than the chance to show this film in a group of people who get to meet Marcella and fall in love with her.
Absolutely, and maybe having a cooking along session as the afterwards. Peter, this has been an incredible conversation, and I thank you very much for taking time. Again, you are on vacation, and I'm kind of interrupted it, but I was so excited when I came across the documentary, and so unfortunately our time together is up, and il Big Ben ha detto stop. And it's time for us to say arrivederci alla prossima. And we want to thank you for tuning in into the program. And if you have any questions or comments, or if you have any topics you would like us to address, please contact us at theitalianradiohour@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. And remember, if you or any of your family and friends have missed a prior episode or would like to listen to this episode again, subscribe to the Italian Radio Hour on YouTube and where you catch your favorite podcasts. And remember to share these podcasts because sharing is caring. So I would like to thank my guest one more time, Peter Miller, our sponsors Istituto Mondo Italiano and La Prima Espresso. Until next time, alla prossima. Ciao, ciao, and enjoy the rest of your vacation, Peter.
Thank you so much. Real joy to do this with you.
Thank you.